from the mountains and the plains. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire. Filling in for Joe Otto is friend of the show, Keith Jones. Keith, how's it going?
Oh, it's super.
Super? Well, I guess it was super on Monday. It's only fitting that hump day would be super as well, I guess.
Come on.
It's just a super kind of week.
Yep.
So we're talking today about schools, whether they should reopen. If you're watching on the Facebook stream, we just threw up a poll. Should schools reopen in the fall? Very simple, yes, no answers, because that has become a political question. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a political question. It should be a scientific question. It should be a question that we leave up to the experts, the actual doctors, to tell us whether or not it is safe to reopen schools. But unfortunately, the group that is deciding whether or not it is safe to reopen are the labor unions, the teachers' unions. They're the ones that get to decide, and they are saying no. It's a really interesting dynamic. Mix that in with the fact that higher education, colleges, universities are also refusing to hold in-person classes, and also demanding that we allow foreign students to remain in the country, which the White House just caved on yesterday, which is really unfortunate. There's a lot of madness. So I want to have Keith on because, Keith, you have some experience in the education field when it comes to colleges, universities. So I want to pick your brain a little bit as we talk through this.
Yeah, believe it or not, I did actually go to college. I did actually graduate. I have my BS degree, and it's actually
and that doesn't mean bullshit. It actually stands for Bachelor of Science.
Well, yes. I mean, clearly that's what I meant, and and it's in the fine art of elementary education. So, I mean, if anybody is capable of talking about this, it's clearly going to be me, because I just checked all of the appropriate boxes. But yes, I do actually have experience in higher ed as well, not only as a student, but on the other side, the administrative and actually working on campuses side. So yeah.
So talk about this, because it feels like this whole discussion is being just driven by fear. It's crazy to me that you can have someone like Andrew Cuomo, who feels it's safe to send COVID patients into nursing homes, but to also hear the left say that it's not safe to send kids back to school. And we know that kids do not tend to carry or transmit the coronavirus. We know that they typically don't die from the coronavirus. We'll talk about those numbers in a bit. It just seems like, again, we're in this clown world where up is down, down is up. If it's safe to put coronavirus patients in nursing homes, I don't understand why schools have to remain closed. I don't understand why Disney World can reopen safely, but schools can't. It just seems like we're stuck in this fear mongering where people are just so terrified that they won't even take any risk whatsoever, even if it means actually hurting their children in the long run. It's just, none of this makes sense to me.
Yeah. How far we have fallen from give me liberty or give me death, right? So now the saying is probably something along the lines of, I will give up all of my liberties if you promise to keep me safe. How far we have fallen. And by the way, right, if you actually, the party of science, I saw your post earlier and I had a little chuckle, right? Mm-hmm. The party of science. There's no science here. You talked about it yesterday. No. The data is cooked. The data is cooked because it has to fulfill a political narrative. And I kind of laughed at it as you guys were going through it yesterday because I knew right? I knew that was the case because they did it here, right? You have actually talked on the show about the Colorado guy who died with the blood alcohol level of 0.55, right? You could get drunk drinking his blood if you were a vampire. So, right, so that was a COVID death, clearly, right? And we're not even talking. We're not even allowed. We're being shunned, right, as thinkers. So you talk about higher ed. The purpose of higher ed, in my opinion, post-secondary education, is to teach you how to critically think, right? So as an employer, like we have companies, right? Max, we have a company. So when you hire people in your company, right, you're going to teach them how to do the job that you're hiring them for. The skill set that you want them to have is the ability to critically think. We are not even allowed to critically think anymore. We don't even teach people how to do it. Instead, what we do is we create bite-sized information, bumper sticker slogans, right? And then we encourage each other to yell those slogans at each other, and that is considered debate. So when you pointed out the teachers union, nothing that they said to the residents of California in that memo makes any sense. It makes no sense.
And I have that. We'll throw that up in a second. We talked off the air about this. I agree. I went to a liberal arts school. I went to Boston College, got my undergraduate there. I got a master's at Villanova. I am a strong supporter of the idea of a liberal arts education and teaching people how to think, teaching people how to communicate, how to express their opinions. But you're right. In today's America, those skills are no longer valuable. You cannot debate. I don't know if you saw this, but one of the op-ed editor at the New York Times resigned because she hated how the New York Times as a paper was shifting and controlling the narratives that got out. If it was a left-leaning narrative, it got out unscathed. But if anyone even wanted to present a centrist or a right-leaning opinion, it got nitpicked and it got sanitized to the point where it no longer made any sense. She resigned. She thought she was there to promote the free exchange of ideas. That's not what our society is about anymore. It's incredibly unfortunate. But yeah, no, a liberal arts education is supposed to teach you how to think and how to communicate. If you're going for a specific skill or a trade, if you're going to business school, it's to teach you how to think in a certain way, right? Pre-med, same thing. If you're going for engineering, it's to teach you the skills that you need. And for many people who aren't going to be doctors or engineers, it's just being able to think critically and to be able to communicate those ideas effectively. But we don't have that anymore. We have people going to college, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a degree in sociology or women's studies or whatever these degrees, which are fine. If that's your goal in life to study that, fine. But someone needs to tell these people that there's no women's study factory. There's no sociology factory out there that's going to actually pay them a living wage. Most of these people, if they don't get sucked up into academia, they just work in the food service industry, which, as we see now, is completely closed. There's so much wrong with our education system as a whole. But the idea that we need to just shut things down and not even hold it at all, I think it makes it even worse. Because if people are spending so much money for an education that ultimately isn't going to really do them anything, and they're not even going to be on campus to learn the actual social skills they need to communicate in the real world, the whole endeavor just seems foolish. They're literally just at that point paying for a piece of paper. Right. Which a lot of people already think. But if you're not going to actually learn anything, you're not going to be there in person, it just seems so fruitless.
Right. So there was a survey or a study that was done recently, and I apologize because I don't have the source material in front of me, but let me try and paraphrase what I recall. They did a survey of children in China. And they asked the children, when you grow up, what do you want to be? And the majority answer was an astronaut. They did the same survey for American children. Do you know what the number one goal, the thing that kids wanted to be was? A social,
well, you told me, so why don't you tell everyone else?
Social media influencer. So,
which is not a job.
When so think about this, right? When we're talking about, we're creating an environment where, as parents, right, we are being told, Max, as parents, that our kids are not safe when they go to school. And in order for them to be able to go to school, we have to submit. We have to bend the knee and submit that our kids are not safe. And then when we make that submission statement, the next thing that's going to come is we, as the government, are the ones who will be looking out for your kids. And we, as the government, who are suppressing the ability for free thought and expression, unless you toe the political line, the appropriate political line, right, are introducing foreign concepts to kids at a violently young age, right, where they can't process it, and so they'll learn it as doctrine. It's sort of like when you teach kids letters and numbers. I'm teaching my daughter right now how to count, right? That's rote memorization. If you tell her something now, there's not an ability for her to critically think about whether or not what I'm saying is true, number one, or whether or not to even understand what truth or false actually is. So when you send them to school and all you're going to teach them to do is sloganeer, then why would you want to go into the sciences? When I was growing up, we used to go outside and play cowboys and Indians. Can I even say that? Right? The fact that I just said that, right? We used to look up to the police officers. They would drive by the house and we would all be outside playing because we went outside and played, right? And they would stop and they would say hello and they would talk to us and ask us, and then we knew their names. The firefighters would drive by. Everybody wanted to be a firefighter. Everybody wanted to be a police. Everybody wanted to be, an astronaut. Yeah. And then when you go to school and you're encouraged to, to enjoy science, to learn the experiment and methodology and hypothesis and theories, right, and laws, and understand the amount of work that has to go into it. It's teaching you things that are valuable in your life. And now what we're doing, right, is we're teaching kids to be afraid. You should be afraid, and you should submit to your superiors who will take care of you. So if I can teach a 5-year-old that they should live their life in fear, right, then I own them. As the government, I own them. Max, the life of Julia. This is what Barack Obama and Joe Biden were talking about in the aughts. The life of Julia. Cradle to grave dependency on somebody else to tell you what to do on a minute-by-minute basis. And I said to you last week at some point in time, because we've been having this conversation because my daughter is going to go to school in the fall. And I said to you, I remember being in school teaching. I remember trying to teach sexual education to 6th graders. That was something I had to do. If you're looking for a challenge, try and do that with 30 boys, right? Try to do that, okay? Yeah. So
good luck.
So when I was in school, you spent more time, right, correcting and disciplining kids, 12-year-old boys, right, to sit in their chair and try and you spend more time doing that than you do teaching math concepts when you're trying to teach them how to do long division, right, and divide fractions, right? Imagine what it's going to be like in the schools in September. Billy, stop hitting Bobby.
If they're even open.
But Billy, stop hitting Bobby with your mask, right?
Yeah. Boys, stop wearing your mask as a bra.
Stop, boys, stop trading masks with each other. Stand on the yellow line. Boys, move your desks further apart. This is the most ridiculous thing. There's going to be no learning going on. The teachers are going to spend the entire time trying to get kids to submit, and the kids have no idea why. So the only way the teacher is going to be able to get kids to do this is by telling them if they don't, they risk being dead. That is going to become the mantra in their head, right? And they're 5, they're 6, they're 7. How are you ever going to undo that?
So let's throw up this. We have a clip. This was played on Fox News last night on Martha McCallum's show. Talking about statistics. Let's go to cut 2.
But for an overwhelming majority of parents say they are concerned about sending their kids back to school. And they feel, as you look at the numbers there, many of them, that is not a risk worth taking. Let's look at some other numbers to inform this in the bigger way. According to the CDC, 30 children in America have died from COVID-19, 30 too many to be sure. To put it in a larger context, in a typical year, 190 children in America die from the flu. 436 take their own lives in suicide. 625 are killed in homicides. We've seen far too much of that in recent weeks. More than 4,000 die from unintentional deaths, such as drowning.
So that was they ran that on Fox News, and I found that particularly helpful. Not because, as she said, it's heartbreaking that 30 children died from COVID-19 this year. But when you compare that to 190 children in a given year dying from the flu on average, we would never accept closing down our schools because of flu season. We'd never accept it, right? Never accept it. We'd never accept closing down our schools because there are homicides up in a city like Chicago. We'd never accept it, right? We'd never accept a suicide surge as an excuse for closing down our schools. If anything, that'd be more of an excuse to keep schools open. But with COVID-19, we're told that we have to shut it down. It's very concerning because the people that are making this claim, I mean, you mentioned the labor union. Let's throw this up. We talked about this Monday. We talked about this yesterday. I want to throw it up again. Let's throw up image number 1. This is the LA Teachers Union. Their demands, they refuse to allow schools to reopen until, quote, privately operated, publicly funded charter schools are shut down, police are defunded, Medicare for all is passed, statewide wealth tax is implemented, housing for homeless are fully funded, and they want financial support for undocumented students, aka illegal aliens, and they want a federal bailout for their school district. That's their demands. Notice COVID-19 is not in there. They're not closed down, at least on their own document, because of COVID-19. They mentioned that they want to make sure it's safe. But if this was about COVID-19, they wouldn't be refusing to do it until the homeless all got homes, right? This has become so politicized. They realize that they have a bargaining chip. They realize that keeping kids out of school is a very painful thing to do. And they are using this as if it's a bargaining chip, as if they can use it to leverage to get other things that they want. It is physically impossible for those things to pass. Like, Nancy Pelosi isn't even in Washington, D.C. right now, right? She's not even there. She's planning to let everyone out on a full August recess. No one's going to be there if she has her way in August, right? To demand that we won't allow kids in L.A. to go to school until the federal government passes Medicare for all, it's just not going to happen. Right? So, Keith, does any of this make sense? Like, is it wrong to criticize them for this? Because it seems like they're just trying to take this and use it as leverage to get what they want.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Max, more kids will die through defunding the police than will perish due to coronavirus. I would bet my entire life savings of $8 that is true, right?
Yeah,
so,
since George Floyd was killed, I think it was 14 or 15 kids have been shot and killed in inner cities in America. So just there alone, we've lost half as many kids as have died from coronavirus. Keep going.
We had the murder of the 1-year-old baby the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, get out of here. Okay, so here's something really interesting, Max. You pay property taxes.
Yeah, happy tax day, by the way.
Right, happy tax day.
as we remember that we're paying taxes for schools that won't open.
You know what? I take back my statement earlier about it being super because I forgot that it was tax day. It is no longer super. Okay. Anyways, so when you pay taxes, when you pay your property taxes, portions of that go to fund the local schools, right? So that's generally why when you live in neighborhoods where property taxes are higher, the amount of funding that goes to those schools is generally better, yada, 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 yada. Okay, we're not going to go down that road. But here's a fun thing for you, okay? If you don't send your kid to school, that school doesn't get credit for the pupil, doesn't get credit for the seat. Thereby, they don't receive the tax dollar. They don't receive the funding.
Depends.
Right?
But depends on the district, but generally, yeah.
In general, right? So for most of this. So if you are advocating as teachers, right, that the schools can't remain open or are not going to open, right, then you are advocating for students to find another avenue to go to school, which means you wouldn't have a job. These people, what they're doing is they're advocating for full salary benefits, right?
Yeah.
I guarantee you, Max, I don't know if you know this or if our listeners know this, right? The reason that you get a master's degree as an elementary school teacher is because
get a raise. Get a bonus.
because it moves you to the right on the scale so you can get a raise. Because time and education level are the things that cause you to get raises, not your productivity or not your skill. It's just time as a teacher and your educational credentials. Okay, so if right, so where I live, there's a state-sponsored free online K-12 program. If you send your kid, so the question put in front of us is, do you want your kid 100% enrolled in physical classroom learning, or do you want them 100% enrolled in online learning? Okay. Now, I understand in other jurisdictions they're talking about, right, hybrids and things like that. I'm just saying where I live. Okay. So I have friends that are teachers, and do you know what they're advocating that we do? That we send our kids to the school, because if we send them to the online school, then the elementary school in our neighborhood doesn't get the funds for the pupil.
Yeah.
And if that reaches critical mass, then they won't have a job.
Yeah. Well, so, which is why, like, I went to a public high school for 1 year. I was on the football team, and it was in a city. It was in Princeton, New Jersey, which is a nice city, but at that time there was a weird kind of violent element to it, of people on the football team being brought in from Trenton. Very weird crime element to it. I got removed from the public school to a private school, and when that happened, my parents got some of their tax money back because I wasn't taking the bus, things like that. What you're going to have happen this year is you're going to have parents make the decision and say, if I can't put my kids in public school and I can't afford to homeschool them because I have to go to work, they need to go somewhere, or else I don't get to go to work. I don't get to earn a living for my family. They're going to start moving them to charter schools and the private schools. But Joe Biden, as a candidate, wants to get rid of charter schools. He's promising that charter schools and private schools will not receive a cent of federal funding under a Biden administration. The labor unions want all of them defunded, as we just went over. It's just they don't actually want the kids to receive the best education possible. That used to be the goal, right? Yes, and when there was a kid who came through public school and he was just disruptive and he couldn't handle it, he got sent to a different school. When there was a kid that was far too bright for his contemporaries, the teachers actually encouraged parents, you should probably look at these gifted and talented schools for your child. He's a star. He shouldn't be held back by the fact that these kids can't get it, right? Today, it's not about that, because if the teachers were being honest, they would tell you that having your kid not be around any other kids for an entire year will hurt their development far more than any online learning could ever help them, right? They would admit that this is not what's best for the kids. But as you said, they want to have a salary. They don't want to get paid any less, even though they're not going to leave their house, right? They want to be able to have all their benefits, and they want everyone to still have to pay property taxes. It's so obvious that they don't have the children's best interests at heart, right? If they did, they would want the kids to go wherever they would have the best experience. But the unions are doubling down. They're digging in their feet because they see that they have leverage. That's ultimately, they know most families can't afford it.
Correct. So two things that you said that are vitally important. I want to emphasize them. Okay. So the first one is my children will learn more through social interactions, through creating friendships, losing friendships, right? Just the natural growth of a kid than you will ever learn, right? By in your math class. Now, learning math is important. Learning science is important. But you will learn how to learn. You will learn how to be a person. You will learn how to be a functional, productive being in our society only when you are required to be around other people. Because what you learn, this is what leftists fail to learn. They have utterly failed to learn. In order for us to have a society, there must be compromise. Because just because you yell louder than I do does not make you more correct. The refuge of the weak is to raise their voice. The refuge of the weak is to name, call, and bully. And do you know where you learned that? In 3rd grade. When the kid who is the biggest, right, threatens everybody else until he gets popped in the nose, and then nobody worries about that kid anymore. And then that kid has to learn that it's not about using his physical stature. Then you'll have the kid.
There's no popping them in the nose when it's cyberbullying.
Right.
When you're not even in the school.
So you learn how to have conversations. You learn what it means to sacrifice. You learn what it means to care about the kids around you, even though you don't even know that that's what you're doing. That is more important. Look, all the people that are watching, I would venture to guess that all the people that are watching have at some point in time in their life had a job. Okay? So you may not have a job now because you're retired, and bless your heart, right? But let's just say that at one point in time, everybody that's listening has had a job. If you were hired, or you were the person doing the hiring, this is what I can promise you. If you were hired by somebody who resonated or liked your soft skills. If you're the hiring manager, what you write, what is presented to me on your resume, I care very little about. We're going to have a conversation, and then we're going to see whether or not I believe that you can be integrated into our work culture. This is what you learn when you go to school, because when it's all said and done, Max, post-secondary ed is where you specialize, right? So if you want to be really good at math, you're going to get really, really, really good at math, right, by learning math and then getting really, really good at math in college. Right? That's what you will do. If you want to be a rocket scientist, if you want to be an engineer, you're going to know that you loved math when you were little. But in order for you to be a rocket scientist, in order for you to be an engineer, you have to learn how to speak. You have to learn how to compromise. And when your life is engineered around bumper stickers and slogans, right, you lost the ability to do all of that. Social media is garbage, because it rewards you for quote unquote mic drop moments. And those mic drop moments, right, they're meant to fulfill a lack of dopamine. They release endorphins, dopamine, right? I got I got that person. No, you did nothing. All you did was raise your voice. You're the 5th grade bully. And eventually, right, that's where the internet tough guy stuff comes from, okay? But eventually, if you sat and had a conversation, which we do all the time, right? If you sit and have a conversation, what you realize is that what we actually want is largely the same thing. How we'd go about getting there is very different, right? But if you can't have that conversation because you're not allowed to, or it gets drowned out, right? Or you're canceled, then we all lose. Everybody loses. And we will have a generation of kids. We'll have a generation of kids that have no social skills. Okay. Now, this leads me to my second point. I'm sorry for rambling, but you said it, so I'm going to.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So the second point is, look, when our society is built on dual incomes, right? The house that you want, the lifestyle that you want, right? The empowerment of having a job, the purpose of having a job. Okay. If you take away schools, okay, frankly, schools are public daycare centers. Let's be honest. Okay, so
they serve that purpose. Yeah,
you take them away, right? Then one of the incomes in a household has to go away. So lifestyle changes happen, right? Tax bases go down, right? Tax to the federal and state governments go down. Everything goes down. The cost of goods do not, right? So who's going to step in to save the day? The government.
Yeah,
so
government.
When the government does something like mandates that there be public schools that you have to go to, your kids are required to be in school. That's a government mandate. Okay, then we're going to not allow your kids to be in school, right? So now you have to homeschool them because you're still going to pay teachers to do half the amount of work. So now you have to be at home to teach them the stuff that you're paying teachers to not do, right? But you can't actually have a job anymore because you have to you have to spend the whole entire day with your
Yeah,
kids.
it
right?
cascades. The whole
But
thing
then-
cascades.
But Max, right? Life of Julia. Utter dependence from cradle to grave on government programs. And do you know who votes for more government programs? The people who are on them.
Yeah.
So if you think
the hardest thing to do to government is to get away with canceling a social program.
correct,
It's next to impossible to do.
because think about it right now. We're not having look. The conversation about Obamacare is so warped and wrong that if you start with pre-existing conditions and everyone has access to health care, right? Well, you're not even talking about what Obamacare is. So go read a book. I know it's hard, but go read a book, because what Obamacare is access to insurance.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's mandated insurance. That's not health care. I have car insurance because I drive a car.
Unless you happen to be a certain percentage above or below the poverty line,
But it
then
doesn't
you qualify for
But
Medicaid.
it doesn't matter. But even if you qualify for Medicaid, Max, Medicaid is not health care.
Oh no, it's not.
insurance.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah.
advocating for
Yeah.
insurance. They're not. What we said this the other day, right? We talked about bills. And they write bills with fancy names on them, the HEROES Act, right? And then they input all this stuff downstream, but you can't be seen as voting against the HEROES Act.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you can't.
This is what I'm talking about. The life of Julia was Barack Obama's fundamentally changing America. Because if you can create government programs and get people on government programs, that when they need the next thing, whatever that next thing is, when they need it, the only solution the first solution they're going to go to is that the government should create it. We have lost the ability as a society, as a culture. We've lost we've lost independence. We've lost liberty. We've lost individualism. We are allowing the government bit by bit, right, to chisel away at how we view ourselves. And that space, right? Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. That space gets filled, and it gets filled not with individualism, it gets filled with government.
Yeah. This week was the 4-year anniversary of something Barack Obama said, which was one of his strangest claims ever, that in certain cities it's easier to buy a gun than it is to buy a book. And what he was trying to say is that in inner city neighborhoods, there are more guns available to people than books. Now, we know factually that's not accurate. It's not easier to legally buy a gun than it is to buy a book. There's no background check requirement at Barnes & Noble. With that said, I find it ridiculous that the big government advocates are also now the ones advocating closing down the schools, because in a big government worldview, they want kids to go to school. As you mentioned, they want kids going to private school to instead go to public school. They want kids going to charter schools to instead go. They want homeschoolers to go to public school because that's their indoctrination center, right? That's where they teach kids everything that they want them to know. And we went through, especially when it gets to higher education, we went through the poll that showed that 88% of high schoolers view the U.S. favorably, but once they get out of college, it's down to 69%, right? We see that, especially when it comes to higher education, that indoctrination really does take hold. It just doesn't make sense why big government advocates would want to close down schools, except for the overall fear aspect of it. As you mentioned, when kids aren't in school, they're at home. When they're at home, the parents either have to pay for them to go somewhere else, or they have to take off work to watch them, right? If they're not working, then the economy doesn't grow. If the economy doesn't grow, Donald Trump loses re-election. It's not that many degrees of separation. It's easy to follow the logical path there. I want to throw up a tweet from Joe Biden. Joe Biden was criticizing Betsy DeVos, who was saying that schools need to reopen. Let's throw up image number 2. This is Joe Biden tweeting. He says, 4 years of Betsy DeVos is more than enough. That it should be are more than enough, whatever. We need a Secretary of Education who is actually a public school educator, as if that is some measure of their ability to know whether it's time to reopen or not. As we showed with the LA Teachers Union, I wouldn't trust them to watch my house plant, right? I would trust them to house sit my dog. I wouldn't trust them to feed my fish while I'm on vacation, right? I wouldn't trust them with anything. I want to play this cut because this was hilarious to watch in real time. MSNBC did a segment on pediatricians and whether they felt that it was time to reopen schools or not. And at the end of the segment, they asked every pediatrician, whether they would feel comfortable sending their kids to schools. And the results literally shocked them. Let's go to cut one.
Go back to school.
I will. My kids are looking forward to it.
Yes. Period. Absolutely.
Absolutely. As much as I can.
Without a hesitation.
Without a hesitation, yes.
I have no concerns about sending my child to school in the fall.
I would let my kids go back to school.
Dr. John Torres, NBC News.
They all said yes. Millions of children around the world are already back at school.
So that end was, I find it hilarious.
Hilarious.
Right? The anchor is like, well, they all said yes. And then you hear the music, dun, 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 dun. And he says, millions of kids all around the globe are already back at school. You can see that he didn't expect that. No one told him that that's what that segment was going to conclude, because you can hear from the violent, dramatic music that the next segment is going to be talking about how dangerous it is to send kids back to school. Dun, 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 dun. I found that hilarious, because when they actually talk to the pediatricians, Joe Biden says we need to follow the experts, follow the experts. When they actually follow the experts all say yes, and they're shocked at it. Like, what? How could you say that? I find it hilarious. Because the pediatricians know that kids are not the ones at risk for either succumbing to the virus or even transmitting it. The data does not confirm that kids are these super spreaders that people originally thought. And the pediatricians know that, which is why they're more than happy to send their kids to back to school. They understand that you stand to lose more by keeping them home than sending them there. And if you're really concerned, then keep the kids away from grandma and grandpa. It's what we've all been doing already. Listen, we're going to reach a point where if we don't get back to the way of doing things, if we don't get back to work, if we don't get back to school, if we don't get back to normal, we're going to lose far more than the virus ever could have taken from us. We're going to lose the ability. It's not just turn it off and we can turn it back on whenever we want. If we keep this economy ground to a halt, if we keep the schools closed, eventually when we finally turn it back on, we'll be in far worse of a position than we ever would have been if we just went back to school, reopened the economy. It's maddening. But Keith, I was talking to you off the air how the goalposts just keep changing. Right? Originally, it was 15 days to slow the spread. That was 100 and some odd days ago. The 15 days to slow the spread, 2 weeks to slow the spread. It was originally everyone stay home so that the hospitals aren't overwhelmed, give them enough time to stockpile medical equipment so that when the cases do start rolling in, they are prepared, right? It was never we're locking down the schools, locking down the whole economy because one person getting sick is unacceptable. It's tragic, right? But that was never the proposition. The goalposts are changing because it's become politicized. The experts aren't saying it. We just looked at that MSNBC clip. The experts aren't saying it. The political labor unions, the commentators, the candidates are the ones pushing this, not the experts, because it's become political and they know they can score points on it.
Yeah. If you're walking around this country, if you're walking on this earth and you believe that your government overlords can legislate risk out of your life, right? I would like to spend 10 minutes seeing how your brain actually functions, because I think it would be a fabulous study, right? The idea that you can legislate risk out of your life is ridiculous. You get in a car, you don't get to decide whether or not you're going to actually make it to your destination.
Yeah,
you don't. Right? But you're still going to get in your car. We make calculated risks all the time. And this conversation has translated into you are not allowed to make calculated risks, because if it will save one person, that is the refuge of the weak. When you don't have an argument, you appeal to base emotions. If it will save one person, right? Max, yeah. I want to rewind a second. You put up a tweet from Joe Biden criticizing Betsy DeVos, right? I assume that Joe Biden, right, would like to put somebody in as the secretary of the Department of Ed. Let me see. How about Arnie Duncan? Let's talk about Arnie Duncan, Max.
I don't want to talk too much about Arnie Duncan.
No, but listen.
People's eyes are going to glaze over.
No, but listen, right? So he's talking about the horror that is Betsy DeVos, okay? If you and Joe talked about this yesterday, student loans, student loan debt, okay? When did 100% of federalized, collateralized student debt come into play? The answer is 2008, 2009, when Arnie Duncan became the Secretary of Education. You used to get student loans from banks, and the bank would make a decision on whether or not they thought you were a good risk, okay? So all you people out there, right, you hear the trillions, over $1 trillion in student debt, right? The federal government is they're never going to not collect on that, ever. They're not going to wipe that away. Yeah. Bernie Sanders says it, right? Joe Biden pretends to say it, right? They're not going to do that because they're going to get 4.6% interest on $1 trillion because you can't discharge it in bankruptcy. You cannot discharge student loans.
Well, Max, you can. It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult.
Max,
you can, but it's next to impossible.
Max, you offer an 18-year-old $55,000, assuming they don't get Pell Grants. It's probably more than this now, but $55,000. You can't tell the kid. If tuition at a university was $10,000, you can't tell the kid who's eligible for $55,000 to only take $10,000 as a loan.
Yeah.
So then you take $55,000 as a loan, you buy a car, you pay rent, right? And then all of a sudden the bill comes due and you can't afford it. But don't worry, the federal government will take care of you. The federal government created the $1 trillion in student loan debts. I don't ever want to see another Secretary of Education like Arnie Duncan. In fact, abolish the education department. Abolish it. Get rid of it. It is useless. It is pathetic. It serves no value for anybody that understands what the Department of Ed does. And I understand I'm boring all of you, but I understand what it does. It is a useless government appendage. It's a jobs program.
Yeah.
All federal agencies is a job program.
Yeah, it's just like the war on poverty. Throwing money at education from a federal level has not improved outcomes. It just hasn't. The data is clear that the more the federal government gets involved with standardized testing, kids don't end up smarter. Kids don't end up better prepared for the world they're going to have to go live in. But you're right. It's possible to get a loan discharged through bankruptcy. It's very, very difficult.
Yes.
Very, very hard. Barely anyone is able to do it. But you're right. It's the only loan that an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old can take out and not have to prove any collateral, doesn't need a cosigner, right? Doesn't need to be able to prove their ability to repay the loan. If that was in any other industry, it would be a recipe for disaster, right? In order to buy a home, you have to prove that you have income coming in, to prove that you're able to repay it, at least a reasonable expectation you can repay it. You have to have some kind of collateral. You have to have some money in the bank account. You have to put down the down payment, right? You have to prove to the bank that their investment isn't just going to disappear, because you can't foreclose on a diploma, right? You can't foreclose on a diploma. You just can't do it. Like, once they know what they know it, which is the reason why you can't really get it discharged, because there's no way for the bank to foreclose to get their investment back. When people say on the left that we need universal college, everyone gets paid to go to college, it's a recipe for disaster, because the last thing we need to do is open up the floodgates for everyone just to do what you just described. I do think that there is a way to have a program like that, similar to how they do in the UK, where you get tested when you're in their version of high school, and it determines what you're good at, right? And if you want to get a college education free and paid for, you have to be going to get a degree that is useful for society, right? I would be very open to the idea of government paying for people to become engineers, for people to become software engineers, for people to become skills, trades. It doesn't have to be college. It could also be plumbers, electricians, right? I'll be open to talking about that. But I will be damned if my federal tax dollars go to help more people go and learn and study, I don't know, like Middle Ages dance, like right, like prehistoric basket weaving, right? Like these are things that people are very interested in. And if you want to go and study that, fine. If you want to go and study all these like Middle Ages, Renaissance art, fine, go and do it. But coming out with an art history degree, and I love art history, coming out of college with an art history degree, there are not enough paid art history positions to justify investing in that. There just aren't, right? If everyone had to go into it the same way that they go into buying a house, you would see the college experience change dramatically, right? If people were forced to actually think about whether or not they can repay this loan and have to prove that their career path they're charting out provides a reasonable likelihood they'll be able to pay the loan back, you'd see college completely differently. You wouldn't have as much partying, as much drinking, right? If people would actually have to think about it. But what the left wants to do is they want to drag that all out the window. They want to make it easier to go to school for nothing, right? To learn what like I don't know, what's a crazy idea like Renaissance music theory, right? To get a bachelor's degree focusing on Renaissance music theory, I don't want any federal dollars touching that. You're free to do that if that's your passion, but federal dollars should not touch that whatsoever.
Yeah. Look, you're going to learn what your passions are when you're a kid. You're going to learn them in elementary school. If you're good at math in elementary school and you like it, you're going to like it in high school. If you're good at it in high school, you're going to be good at it in college. And if you're good at math, you can be a physicist, you could be a rocket scientist, you could be an engineer. Yeah. You could be, if you learn at a young age that art class is your favorite thing, right? You could be an architect. You could be a graphic designer. You can actually... You
could be an artist.
You could be an artist. You could be...
You don't need a college degree to do it.
Right. But this idea that the way in which you produce success for yourself, right, is through some sort of self-realization between the ages of 18 and 22 is completely BS. It's completely BS. And college, right, the original doctors weren't doctors. It was a statement of, or a recognition of learnedness in a particular subject.
Very learned.
Right? You didn't have to go to college. This whole idea that in order for you to be successful, you have to go to college, right, is garbage.
You didn't have to go to college. You didn't have to go to college to become a lawyer. Abraham Lincoln studied the law and learned the law himself by candlelight in a log cabin. In some states like New York and California, you can actually pass the bar without going to a law school. You basically take an apprenticeship with a lawyer and you learn the law. You read the law outside of school, right? But the number of states where you can do that is very, very low.
Right.
Most states do not let you do that. They've shifted all of the responsibility onto the education system, which is bloated, it is corrupt, it is way too expensive. And then at the end of the day, they also don't even want people to be on campus.
Max, go further, okay? If going to school is a prerequisite in your mind for success, okay, then you have to go to school for everything. Max, I have clippers that I purchased from the local Walgreens. It could be CVS where you're at. It's Walgreens where I'm at, okay? And then I can put attachments on them and cut my own hair. If I cut
my son's hair last month.
If I was to walk into an establishment and ask somebody to cut my hair, that person has to have a license.
Yes.
Okay? If you're a doctor, you should go to school and get a license. If you're a nurse, if you're an engineer, if you are the person that I am going to count on to build structures, yes, you should probably go to school. Yeah. If you're a barber, come on.
Well, so no, that's different. So hairdressers are not barbers in most states. They're two different licenses. So like when I go to get my hair cut at just like a regular haircut place, whenever I ask, can you trim the beard? Can you shave the beard? Most of the women cutting my hair say they can't because they have a hairdresser's license, but they don't have a barber's license. That's extra schooling to be able to take a straight blade to someone's neck and to actually shave, which I can understand if you're going to have people taking a straight razor to someone's neck. I could understand at least maybe like a one-day seminar on that. Like there has to be some level of extra training for that. I get that.
Right.
But there's so many different aspects of our lives that are being regulated by these required certificates and required degrees, and when you actually look at it, none of them are actually necessary for the job being done.
You have to have a license to be an interior designer. Do you know what licenses? Yes, you do.
In some states. In some states.
So in order, listen. In order to, you're correct, right? There are varying regulations. My point is broader. When you create licensure tracks, when you create certification tracks, right? You do two things simultaneously, right? You block out broad public participation, right? You limit the number of people that can do a certain thing, and you create, right? You create dependencies on those certification programs, largely offered through either community or university colleges, right? And then you create regulatory agencies on the government side to enforce them. There is no reason why, if I called you and said, hey, get in your car, drive 8,000 miles, come to my house, right? I need you to tell me where I should position my dining room table and my couches. I'm oversimplifying what an interior designer does, right? If you called yourself an interior designer, you could not actually do that here where I live. You couldn't. You have to have a license. So you know how you get the license? You go to school. To what? Look, I'm using an example, and there's some hyperbole in what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map. There are definitely states that require it.
They require it.
It's a mess. This is stupid.
Yes, what I'm saying is, if I require the license, then everybody who doesn't have the license is already behind me, right? So I have now protected I've protected my craft. Okay, now you have to pay to get into my circle, right? But I'm always going to beat you to the punch. And then because it's my craft and I got to set up the rules for the regulatory agency, I get to decide who comes in and who doesn't.
Right, it's taxi medallions all over again.
Correct.
It's taxi medallions whether Uber complies with it. It's the whole deal. It's as soon as you are forced to have a license or register, you want to enforce that against everyone because the risk of someone doing it unlicensed and unregistered cuts into your bottom line, right?
Correct.
So it's self-fulfilling.
And then I can have lawyers write the laws, and then I can have lawyers sue each other, right, for enforcement and modification of those laws, right? We are basically creating, so higher ed, you think about higher ed, again, I say this I think every time I'm on the show, relax your eyes and look at what's actually happening, okay? If you're going to be an architect or an engineer, you have to have some schooling. Those are science-based jobs. If
we see what happens when engineers build bridges that shouldn't be building bridges. It's very dangerous.
If you're going to launch things into space, or you're going to create things that fly, right? You need to have some skills. If what you're going to do, if your life's passion is doing the hair and makeup of ladies, right? Why do you need a license to do that?
Well, I do think some of that is so some of that is what we talked about, that once you are in that profession, you want to stop people from just cutting people's hair on their own, right? You want that protection. I do also think that a lot of these industries, they have the training, the licenses to make the position feel like it is more important, right? When I was in school, I went to bartending school during one summer. You don't need to go to bartending school to be a bartender, right? You don't. And it actually didn't help me get a job in bartending at all, right? It was all just personal connections that I had to leverage, right? A lot of these things are designed to make it appear more important than it actually is. The same way that a liberal arts degree today in colleges and universities is propped up, even though you're never actually going to use that because you're not allowed to have a discussion and a debate with anyone because you'll be canceled and branded a racist if you disagree. Right? So a lot of it is self-fulfilling in that way.
So Max, before you move off of this, right, let's wrap it all back up. Let's wrap what we just talked about, which seems completely disconnected from where we started, which was kids should be going to school in the fall. Let's wrap it back, okay? If the kids are not allowed to go to school in the fall, what are they going to be able to do from a job standpoint when they're out of school? If they can't go to school to get their license, and they can't work in jobs that require licenses, what on earth are they going to do? They're going to do nothing. And then who are they dependent upon in order to be able to eat and have a roof over their head? And the answer is, ladies and gentlemen, the federal government. Thank you very much. It only took me 53 minutes to get from start to finish, but I have managed to wrap it all in a ridiculously complicated bow.
Well, before we cut, I want to play a clip because Joe Biden has another view of what kids should be doing. Obviously, he said he doesn't want schools to reopen unless it's completely safe. But Joe Biden said something that was so eyebrow-raising. We had to find a way to play it on this show. Let's play cut 3. This is part of Joe Biden's speech yesterday. Cut 3.
To get our people to work and our kids to school safely, to get our kids to market swiftly, to power a clean energy revolution in this country, we need to modernize America's infrastructure.
So we need to modernize America's infrastructure to get kids to market swiftly. Let's play that one more time in case people didn't get it. One more time.
To get our people to work and our kids to school safely, to get our kids to market swiftly, to power a clean energy revolution in this country, we need to modernize America's infrastructure.
Kids to market. That phrase is, he meant to say goods to market. Fine. He said kids to market. That phrase is him saying we need infrastructure. Even if he said it accidentally, we need infrastructure to be able to sell kids, which is the last thing Joe Biden, the person who has infinite numbers of videos of him sniffing and touching and groping children, the last thing he should say is that one of the planks in his platform is expedited selling of small children. Like, no. Like, he should know better. And that has all the conspiracy theorists like going crazy, like thinking he's in cahoots with Wayfair and they're selling kids on the market. We don't need this, Joe. Joe, don't say that. No one wants that.
No.
If that's part of your platform, no one actually wants to bring kids to market.
No.
No one wants it.
No. I am excited. I'm excited. You could hear it in the inflection in my voice. I'm excited that he's finally embracing the cleanness that is nuclear power. Just imagine how great that is that we have to modernize our infrastructure, right? So bring clean energy. I mean, I am a fan. Look, he has come. It's only taken him 77 plus years to do it, but he has come around, right? I have a hard time engaging with a conversation with you about selling kids, but it is a little bit.
It's hard.
It is a little bit ridiculous because that guy. Look, you remember the movie Men in Black? You know, at the very beginning of the Men in Black, right? When the alien comes down and crashes into the ranch, and then the guy goes outside, and then the cockroach pulls him into the hole and kills him, and then puts his skin on. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, right?
Well,
but is somebody else living inside of Joe Biden's body right now? This is kind of awkward.
We're not into the conspiracy theories. We're not into the lizard people, right? But when there's that much evidence that he sniffs and touches kids, the words "bringing kids to market" should never leave his mouth.
No, it shouldn't.
It should never leave anyone's mouth.
That's what I was going to say. Right? That's
a Freudian slip that should never leave anyone's mouth. Well, we had our poll up all episode. Thanks for voting on it. Should schools reopen in the fall? Yes, 90% said yes, 10% said no. So at least among our listeners, the consensus is clear. It's time to reopen the schools. Well, thank you, Keith, for sitting in. Thanks for lending your expertise on this matter. It was interesting. I hope everyone's eyes didn't glaze over. But this is an important issue that we need to talk about more.
Right in the feels, Max. You just got me right in the feels.
Yeah. Well, just don't watch any more Joe Biden stuff. It'll make your skin crawl.
I'm over it.
Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember that you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone. You can also find us on Google Play Store if you have an Android. You can also download us on the Podbean app, as well as conservative-daily.com/podcast. We're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube every day, so check us out there. And also check us out on Parler, at Conservative Daily, all one word. If you follow us, we'll be happy to follow you back. So again, my name is Max McGuire. Thanks for Keith Jones for filling in today. And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.